said Portland was the #2 city. Do you know what the #1 city is?
I currently do not, because the stats are changing. And then the other thing with statistics I want to say is that, I would say like 60%, somewhere around there, just kind of throwing a number out, is not reported. Do you know who #1 is for minor child sex trafficking? I just know when I did a...
Los Angeles.
Yeah. So surprisingly, the West Coast is pretty rampant. It is rampant everywhere, so I don't want people to think and get comfortable and think that, you know, your city or your state is immune from this, because it is not.
And one comment I want to make alongside with that is that the number of children at risk of being exploited sexually in this country right now would fill 1,300 school buses. The U.S. Justice Department estimates 100,000 to 300,000 children are at risk right now. It's a tragedy we can actually circumvent through education and empowerment and events like today.
Hi, I don't have a question, I just have a comment. Thank you for coming forward today. I think you're a true hero and you're just so courageous, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for your story. It really hit close to home for us. I just wanted to ask, and I'm not sure who the question is directed to, wanted to thank you all very much. I'm a victim advocate and dual hats in my community as well. Ask a few to come up with me so that we can join and jump on this bandwagon, so I'll jump on that with you. But I wanted to say, other than the $50 for the Johns, that I could have this wrong, they're being slapped on the hand with the $50 charge. Is there any kind of a restorative justice panels being set up for the traffickers or the pimps, where they have to come in and possibly the survivors that have balanced out some enough to face them, maybe not the same matching one, but where they're having to face what they've done in other ways as a part of their...
As part of their sentencing? No, at this point we don't. You heard earlier about the diversion program for survivors that's in place. At this point we don't have such a thing like a John School in place. At this point we want to make a stance in our community to say buying sex will not be tolerated, period. And this is why we are with the city attorneys and our district attorney's office, who have been supporting us so phenomenally in the stance, saying, you know what, we're not going to give you a deferred sentence. Either it is trial or you plead guilty, period.
I want to add to that. I recently started a venture in trying to be a part of changing legislation to protect victims and also to prosecute the sex buyers and the traffickers. So, knowing that information, that it is only a $50 fine, because I believe the services that we're giving for victims, I think a lot of that funding should come from the fines, that if we hit them in the pocketbook, you know, like Jerome was telling me a story. Yeah, hit them in their pocketbook, because I don't think it's fair for the people that are victimizing our children that the state should have to pay for that. I really think it should come out of the Johns and the traffickers' pockets. It really should. As well as very ongoing, I would like to see an in-depth mental health treatment program for traffickers and Johns, a mandatory sex offender registry if you are caught purchasing or selling a child. So those things are being put into place. It's just taking a lot of collaboration. So I would definitely be a voice in this community, and we'll get that changed. I'm very proud of the shaming of the Johns. There has been a lot of controversy over that. Well, the only way that we're gonna really put a dent in this, I think, is to expose these people's secrets, because secrets is what is a part of what drives this, because it's a way for them to be able to continue doing what they're doing, because it's not out in the open, right? So if people know, if we know who are buying our children for sex, if we know who are selling our children for sex, and that if they're in our neighborhoods, yeah, I guarantee they're gonna leave Colorado Springs.
And one of the things I wanted to add to that, I was telling Ellie and Hope, a good friend of mine does work in demand, and actually it's her graduate work. And she told me that there are actually websites that the John set up that tell you they tell each other when the women who work at strip clubs have their rent due, how many kids they have, all their vulnerabilities. They also tell who's being trafficked and when they're most vulnerable. So we've got to shut sites like this and Backpage down so we can really just eliminate this problem, because if we don't attack demand, it's never going to end.
Question for all three of you, but Jerome, specifically you mentioned that less than 10% of the professionals have any kind of awareness training. Other than the ER and doctors, you mentioned the school, the principals, the teachers, and the police department, what are the other touch points that in either one of your cases it could have or should have been caught earlier to get you out of there?
I think in my case, as I mentioned, I think education and empowerment within the school system, and Unlock Freedom is doing amazing work in that area. Also, Ohio now has passed legislation that requires everyone in cosmetology to have an hour of human trafficking training before they can get their license, because that's one of the big conduits for people being trafficked, children and women. For boys, a bit more difficult. For boys, the two catch points are usually juvenile justice and the ER. So we have to educate our medical professionals about how to spot these victims because they're there. Delta has done a really great job educating their employees, because right now at Denver Airport, there are children being trafficked through that airport. So we have to educate not only airline employees, but hotel employees, because they see this happening every day. And they can be a crucial factor in calling law enforcement and letting them know what's going on. So I think if we train, even there's a program for cab drivers where you donate used cell phones and cab drivers can report it. One of my good friends is a member of an organization called Truckers Against Trafficking. And they train the nation's truckers to spot human trafficking victims. And they do phenomenal work. I can't say enough about them. I just love what they do. So there are many allies in this fight that we can bring in we don't normally think about. But I think any adult that comes in contact with a child needs to be educated and empowered to be able to report this, because this is happening in plain sight. I mean, this is a silent crime. So we can really do more to open our eyes and recognize these victims and help them escape, help them find a life, help them heal. So for me, I would say, education in schools, education within the medical community, educating bus drivers, just any adult, because I will tell you, one thing that made me vulnerable, as I spoke about, is I was starved for affection. I would talk to anybody who smiled at me. So if you're an adult and you see a child, smile, because you know what a difference it'll make in a child's life. So I think that anybody who comes in contact with a child, who works at a theme park, who works at a toy store, whatever, I think everybody needs to be trained, because it's all around us. And if we come together, not only as a community, as a city, as a state, as a nation, we can really eradicate this problem. And as I told Ellie, I think our mutual objective here is to shrink the ground beneath the feet of traffickers where they have no place left to go. And that's what we've worked 24/7 to try and do. And thank you so much for your question.
So I know there's many other questions in the audience, and I apologize, but they will be available at their